My phone buzzed on the bar next to my beer. It was a random number, no caller ID. Ignoring calls from unknown numbers was a habit I picked up after the breakup. But something about it, a nagging feeling. I slammed my beer down, grabbed the phone, and answered. Hello. Static. Then a muffled voice, barely audible. Mark, listen, it's about Sarah. The line went dead. My stomach lurched. Sarah, my ex-fiancée, the woman who shattered my trust into a million pieces. A million possibilities raced through my mind. Was it her? Was she trying some new tactic to win me back? Had she finally lost it? No. This felt different, urgent. A cryptic message about Sarah, delivered anonymously? This was something else entirely. I slammed my half beer on the counter, ignoring the bartender's questioning stare. Sorry, gotta go, I muttered, throwing a crumpled bill on the bar. The message could be a prank, a cruel joke. But what if it wasn't? What if it held a piece of the puzzle I'd been missing all this time? I sprinted out of the bar, ignoring the cool night air, and hailed a cab. Sarah had moved away a few months back, supposedly for a fresh start. Did she have something to do with this message? The thought sent a fresh wave of anger through me. Maybe, just maybe, this was the chance I'd been waiting for, a chance to understand her betrayal, a chance for some semblance of closure. The cab ride felt like an eternity. Finally, I reached my apartment building, fumbling with my keys as adrenaline pumped through my veins. Inside, I rushed to my laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. I needed to find the source of the message. It was a long shot, but maybe there was a trace, a digital footprint I could follow. Hours melted away as I dug through online records, frustration mounting with every dead end. Just as I was about to give up, a notification popped up on my screen. An email from the same anonymous address used for the phone call. My heart hammered in my chest as I clicked it open. The email contained a single line. Meet me at the pier, midnight. Come alone, it's about Sarah. The wind whipped my hair as I stood on the pier, the icy December air biting at my exposed skin. Midnight. Not a soul in sight, except for a lone figure huddled at the far end. My gut churned. Was this a setup, a bad idea? The email offered no details, just a cryptic message about Sarah. Doubt gnawed at me, but the memory of the video, the raw betrayal, fueled my resolve. I took a deep breath and started walking, boots crunching on the frozen wooden planks. As I got closer, the figure emerged from the shadows. It was a woman, bundled in a thick coat, her face obscured by a scarf. You Mark? She rasped, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. Yeah, I replied cautiously. Who are you? What's this about Sarah? She hesitated, then pulled down the scarf. Moonlight revealed a face etched with worry, late 30s, eyes filled with a nervous energy. My name's Lisa. I used to work with Sarah at her old company. My brows furrowed. Used to? Yeah, I quit a few months ago. Look, this isn't easy, but you need to know something about Sarah's situation. She gestured for me to follow her further down the pier, away from the faint glow of the distant city lights. Alarm bells started ringing in my head. This whole thing felt sketchy, a scene straight out of a bad movie. But the mention of Sarah's situation, whatever that meant, kept me rooted to the spot. What situation? I pressed, my voice tight. Lisa stopped and turned to face me. The guy in the video, the one Sarah was with, he wasn't who you thought he was. He was trouble, big trouble. My heart hammered in my chest. Could this be real? A shred of hope, a sliver of doubt about Sarah's motives, flickered within me. What do you mean? Explain. Lisa took a deep breath, her voice dropping to a hushed whisper. He was using her, Mark. Using her for some kind of business deal. She thought she was in love, but the rest of her words were drowned out by a sudden, ear-piercing screech. Headlights cut through the darkness, blinding for a moment. Then a car screeched to a halt right behind us on the pier. A dark figure emerged, a menacing silhouette against the car's headlights. There you are, Lisa, the figure snarled. And who's your friend? Lisa's face drained of color. She grabbed my arm, her grip tight with fear. Mark, you gotta go. Now. My blood ran cold. The man approaching on the pier was the same one from the video, the one Sarah betrayed me with. His face, twisted in anger, sent a fresh wave of fury coursing through me. Lisa's grip on my arm tightened, her voice a choked whisper. He's dangerous, Mark. Please just run. Run? Part of me wanted to bolt, to get the hell out of there. But another part, fueled by a primal urge for payback, wouldn't budge. This wasn't just about Sarah anymore. This was about Lisa, a stranger caught in the crossfire of her lies. And maybe, just maybe, a chance to understand the truth behind Sarah's betrayal. Who is he? I growled at Lisa, my voice surprisingly steady. What's he after? Lisa's answer was cut short by the approaching figure. He stopped a few feet away, his eyes flickering between us with a predatory glint. Lisa, he snarled again, this time with a dangerous edge. We need to talk. He didn't even acknowledge me. The disrespect, the arrogance of it, fueled my anger further. You got something to say to me, pal? I spat, stepping forward, putting myself between him and Lisa. He scoffed, a humorless laugh escaping his lips. You? Who are you? Doesn't matter. I shot back, trying to project a confidence I didn't entirely feel. But you seem to be forgetting something. This is a public pier. My words hung in the air, a tense silence settling over us for a beat. The man's eyes narrowed, his gaze lingering on me for a long moment. Then, a slow smirk spread across his face. Public, huh? He drawled. He reached into his pocket, his movements slow and deliberate. My heart hammered in my chest as I saw the glint of metal. Maybe so, but nobody saw us come here, did they? Panic clawed at my throat. This wasn't a bluff. This guy, whoever he was, wasn't afraid to get violent. A primal fear urged me to run, but the thought of leaving Lisa at his mercy held me frozen. I needed a plan fast. Before things got completely out of hand. Adrenaline surged through me, the icy night air a stark contrast to the heat rising in my chest. This wasn't how I planned this. No grand confrontation, no dramatic reveal. Just me, a scared woman, and a potentially dangerous guy on a deserted pier with a glint of metal in his hand. Thinking fast, I glanced around. There, a few dozen yards away, a lone figure walked their dog, oblivious to the drama unfolding. Hey, I yelled, my voice booming across the pier. The dog walker stopped, startled, looking in our direction. The man with the weapon, caught off guard, momentarily shifted his focus. It was my chance. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged forward, grabbing Lisa's arm and yanking her behind me. Run! I shouted, pushing her towards the approaching dog walker. Lisa stumbled, then regained her footing and bolted. The man reacted quickly, cursing under his breath. He shoved the weapon back in his pocket and sprinted after her. I watched in a mixture of fear and a strange sense of satisfaction. At least I'd gotten her out of the immediate danger zone. Now it was me. The man was closing the distance fast, his face contorted in rage. My mind raced. Fighting him head-on was a fool's game. I needed to buy time, maybe attract more attention. Suddenly, a brilliant, albeit reckless, idea struck me. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Right before the guy reached me, I held it up high and aimed it at him, the screen illuminating my face. Hey, I yelled, trying to sound more confident than I felt. You think I'm afraid to call the cops? We're on a public pier, remember? The man skidded to a halt, surprised by my sudden action. He squinted at the phone in my hand, then back at me. His face was a mask of indecision, a war raging behind his eyes. You think anyone's gonna hear you out here? He scoffed, but there was a hint of doubt in his voice. There's someone right there, I bluffed, pointing towards the dog walker who was now watching the scene unfold with wide eyes and a leash held tightly in their hand. And guess what? I have your picture. It was a complete lie, of course. But the seed of doubt seemed to be planted. The man hesitated for another beat, then let out a frustrated growl. This ain't over, he snarled, throwing a final menacing glare in my direction before turning and disappearing into the darkness. My legs gave way, and I slumped down on the cold wooden planks, chest heaving, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It was over for now. But the encounter left me shaken, the adrenaline slowly replaced by a cold dread. Who was that guy? What did he want with Sarah? More importantly, was Sarah truly innocent in all of this, or was there more to her story than Lisa let on? The night deepened, the icy wind whispering secrets I desperately wanted to unravel. The shrill ring of my phone tore me away from the mountain of paperwork on my desk. It was an unknown number again. Hesitantly, I picked it up. Hello. Mark, it's Lisa. My breath hitched. Lisa, the woman from the pier, the one who claimed Sarah was being used. A mix of emotions flooded through me, suspicion, a flicker of hope, and a healthy dose of caution. Lisa, I acknowledged cautiously. What is it? I need to see you. It's important about Sarah. Her voice was shaky, laced with urgency. My mind raced. Could this be a trap? Another one of Sarah's schemes? But the desperation in her voice, where I finally asked, more out of curiosity than trust. The park, near the fountain. Noon, please, Mark. It's the only way I can explain. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, a war raging within me. Part of me wanted to run to the farthest corner of the earth and hide. The other part, the part that craved answers, the part that still held a sliver of hope for Sarah's innocence, couldn't ignore the plea. Noon, the park, a public place, at least. Taking a deep breath, I grabbed my coat and headed out the door. The walk to the park was a blur. My mind replayed the events of the past few days, the cryptic message, the confrontation on the pier, the lingering questions about Sarah's involvement. As I approached the fountain, I spotted her sitting on a nearby bench, bundled in a jacket despite the unseasonably warm weather. Seeing her again brought back a wave of conflicting emotions. Hesitantly, I walked towards her. Lisa? I called out, my voice sounding rougher than usual. She looked up, her eyes filled with a mixture of fear and relief. Mark, you came. I stopped a few feet away, unsure of how to proceed. Why? I asked bluntly. Why should I trust you? Lisa took a deep breath. I know it looks bad, but you need to hear me out. Sarah, she was caught in the middle of something dangerous. She didn't know what she was getting into. Her words were a bombshell. The image of Sarah, the woman I loved, the woman who betrayed me, being a victim, it was hard to swallow. But a tiny spark of hope flickered within me. Dangerous? I pressed, needing her to elaborate. Lisa nodded, her gaze dropping to her lap. The guy from the pier, his name is Alex. He works for a shady investment firm. He was using Sarah to get to some information her company had. My mind struggled to keep up. Investment firm? Information? This was a whole new level of betrayal, one I hadn't even considered. And Sarah? Caught in the middle of some corporate espionage. How do you know all this? I asked, suspicion creeping back in. Lisa looked up, her eyes pleading. I used to work with Sarah, remember? I knew about Alex, about his methods. When I saw you two together, the video, I knew I had to warn you. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small flash drive. This has proof. Emails, recordings, everything Alex used on Sarah. The weight of the flash drive felt heavy in my hand. Proof. A chance to understand the truth, the whole truth. But with it came a new dilemma. Did I believe her? Was Sarah truly innocent, or was this all part of some elaborate scheme? Looking into Lisa's worried eyes, I knew I had a decision to make. A decision that could either bring closure or plunge me deeper into this web of lies and deceit. The knock on my apartment door shattered the silence of the evening. My heart jumped into my throat. It had been weeks since the whole Sarah mess blew up. Weeks of radio silence on my end, a barrage of desperate voicemails on hers. Who could it be at this hour? Cautiously, I approached the door, peering through the peephole. My breath hitched. It was her, Sarah. She looked different, gaunt, her eyes rimmed with red, a stark contrast to the polished, confident woman I used to know. My stomach clenched. What did she want? After a beat of hesitation, I cracked the door open a sliver. Sarah? I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Mark, please, she pleaded, her voice thick with emotion. Can we just talk? Part of me wanted to slam the door shut, to shut her out and all the memories she brought flooding back. But another part, a curious, almost morbid part, craved some kind of explanation. I sighed, stepping aside and opening the door wider. "Come in," I muttered, surprised by the words escaping my lips. She entered hesitantly, her eyes flitting nervously around the room before landing on me. The silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. "Mark, I'm so sorry," she finally choked out, tears welling up in her eyes. "Everything I did, it was a huge mistake. I never meant to hurt you." Her words felt hollow, empty promises after the betrayal. But a tiny voice inside me, the one that still held a flicker of care for the woman she used to be, prodded me to listen. "Lisa," I started, my voice low and steady. She told me everything. About Alex, the lies, the whole mess. She flinched at the name, a flicker of shame crossing her features. I know. She shouldn't have involved you. But I was scared, Mark. Scared of Alex, scared of what he might do. I studied her, searching for a hint of truth in her tear-filled eyes. Was she genuinely remorseful? Or was this just another act? "So you left your job, moved away." I trailed off, letting the question hang in the air. "A fresh start," she offered, her voice barely a whisper. That's all I wanted, a chance to outrun the mess I made. We stood there for a beat longer, the air thick with unspoken words and a tangled web of emotions. Part of me wanted to believe her, to see the woman I fell in love with again. But the other part, the one hardened by betrayal, couldn't shake off the lingering doubt. "I need some time, Sarah," I finally said, my voice firm. "A lot of time." Disappointment clouded her eyes, but she nodded in understanding. "Okay," she whispered, turning towards the door. "I understand. Just, please know that I'm truly sorry." With that, she walked out, leaving me alone in the echoing silence of my apartment. The door clicked shut behind her, a final punctuation mark on a chapter of our lives. As I stood there, the weight of the flash drive from Lisa heavy in my pocket, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. The truth, whatever it was, still lay hidden within the digital files. And I was determined to find it. The familiar chime of my phone startled me from my work. It wasn't unusual for work emails to come through at all hours, but a nagging feeling told me this was different. I swiped the screen, a text notification blinking on the display. Unknown number. My stomach clenched. Spam? Probably, but lately, with everything that happened with Sarah, I couldn't ignore anything anonymous. With a deep breath, I tapped the message. "He wasn't who you thought he was. Look into Alex's past, financial crimes, offshore accounts. She deserves better." The message was short, cryptic, but the implication hit me like a ton of bricks. Alex, the guy from the pier, the one Sarah claimed was using her, could it be true? Was there more to his story than a desperate attempt to get information? A surge of conflicting emotions flooded through me. Anger, for being so easily manipulated by Sarah's lies. A flicker of pity. The thought of her being used by someone like Alex left a sour taste in my mouth. But most of all, a burning curiosity. The truth, however ugly, was something I craved. Without wasting another minute, I pulled out Lisa's flash drive. It had been sitting untouched on my desk for weeks, a constant reminder of the mess Sarah had created. Now, it felt like the key to unlocking a mystery. I plugged the drive into my computer, a knot of tension tightening in my gut as the files loaded. Emails, documents, voice recordings, a treasure trove of information, all detailing Alex's shady dealings. The deeper I dug, the more my jaw clenched. This wasn't just some harmless flirtation. Alex was using Sarah, using her company's access to manipulate the stock market for his own gain. Disbelief warred with a strange sense of vindication. Sarah hadn't been completely innocent, not by a long shot. But she'd clearly been manipulated, played for a fool by this Alex character. Now, the question loomed. What did I do with this information? Expose Alex and his web of lies, potentially giving Sarah a chance to see his true colors? Or remain silent and let her face the consequences of her actions, consequences that could very well involve legal trouble? The decision hung heavy in the air, a test of my own integrity. Part of me wanted revenge, to see Sarah suffer for the pain she inflicted. But another part, a smaller, more forgiving one, couldn't shake the image of her tear-stained face, the regret in her eyes the last time I saw her. Taking a deep breath, I closed the laptop, the incriminating files burning a hole in my digital pocket. The decision wasn't easy, but I knew in my gut what I had to do. I wouldn't expose Alex, wouldn't be his puppet master. Sarah would have to learn the truth on her own and face the music for her own choices. As for me, it was time to move on, to truly live. The day I tied the knot with Michael, it felt like we were smack in the middle of a movie scene. Autumn was showing off, splashing golden hues all over our quaint hometown chapel. Surrounded by the cheer of family and friends, it felt like nothing could touch us. Yeah, that was the dream, the kind you don't want to wake up from. Michael, with his big heart and a mind sharp as a tack, was all about fighting the good fight, making the world a fairer place one courtroom battle at a time. Fast forward a year, and that dream started to feel a bit more like I was talking to the walls. Michael's noble crusade had him chained to his work, leaving me rattling around in our house like a lone pea in a drum. Tried to drown the silence with painting, but let's be real, even Picasso would have felt lonely in that silence. Then came Alex. Met him at some fancy art gallery opening I dragged myself to, hoping to shake off the cobwebs. Guy was like a walking, talking adrenaline rush. Had this vibe about him that made you want to be part of whatever world he was the king of. And damn, did he notice me. Made me feel like I wasn't just part of the furniture. Home life. Well, that started to crumble like a cookie in a toddler's grip. Michael and we began sparring over dumb stuff. Missed dinners turned into missed conversations, which turned into me carving out a slice of independence he didn't seem to like much. Alex, though, he was all about the night and making sure you remembered it. Started sneaking around with him, getting a taste of life on the wild side. Parties that lasted until the sun was too embarrassed to come out. Friends that made every night an adventure. Then came the day Michael found that hotel receipt. You could practically hear his heart crack, but the guy just swallowed it and put on his poker face. Didn't scream, didn't yell. Just that look of disappointment that's worse than any shouting match. The affair? It was like being on a high-speed train with no brakes. Thrilling, sure, but deep down, I knew I was heading for a crash. That guilt. Tried to ignore it, but it's like trying to tune out a fire alarm. So there you have it. A tale of two lives. The one I promised to cherish, and the one that promised me the stars. Caught in the middle, trying to figure out where the hell I belong. Just when I thought things couldn't get more twisted, Michael pulls a rabbit out of his hat. A weekend getaway. A chance to glue back the pieces of our crumbling marriage. Seeing that hope flickering in his eyes, it was like a punch to the gut. A wake-up call I wasn't ready for. Guilt gnawed at me as we headed out, the silence in the car louder than any argument we'd ever had. The getaway was supposed to be our lifeline, but my phone buzzed nonstop, Alex's name flashing more than I cared to admit. Each message was a siren call I struggled to ignore. Lying to Michael about who was texting became a reflex, one I hated with every fiber of my being. Then, as if my little soap opera needed more drama, Alex's ex decided to crash the party. Outside a bar, looking like a scene straight out of a cheesy movie, she cornered me. "He's not who you think he is," she said, her eyes burning a hole through the lies I'd been feeding myself. Did I listen? Hell no. I was too far gone, too wrapped up in Alex's spell. Back home, every conversation with Michael felt like we were tiptoeing through a minefield, our home a battleground where no one wins. We were strangers, sharing nothing but memories of better days and a stubborn refusal to let go. Then, life decided to throw me a curveball, pregnant. The two lines on that test might as well have been a crossroads, forcing me to choose between the mess I'd made and the life I'd always dreamed of. Panic set in, a heavy, suffocating thing. Telling Alex felt like defusing a bomb without knowing which wire to cut. His reaction was a cold splash of reality. "You need to fix this," he said, his voice devoid of the warmth I'd mistaken for love. Just like that, the fantasy shattered. Choosing to keep the baby was the first decision I'd made in a long time that felt right, a chance to mend fences with Michael. I ended things with Alex, cutting him out like the cancer he was. But the scars remained, a constant reminder of the price of my mistakes. That decision, though, it was more than just choosing between two men. It was about choosing who I wanted to be, the kind of life I wanted for my child. The damage was done, yeah, but maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance for redemption. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the video so far. If you do, please take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps me out and lets me know you appreciate the content. Also, if you haven't already, consider subscribing to the channel. Subscribing is a great way to stay updated with all the latest videos and to be part of our growing community. It's quick, it's free, and it ensures you won't miss out on any upcoming content. So go ahead, smash that like button and hit subscribe. Your support means a lot and keeps this channel going. Thanks for watching. The moment Michael found out about the pregnancy, our world imploded. It was like watching a slow-motion car crash. You know the impact's coming, but you're just too frozen to do anything about it. His face, usually so open and understanding, closed off as he pieced together the timeline, his trust in me crumbling right before my eyes. "How could you?" he asked, his voice a mix of hurt and disbelief. I couldn't bear the weight of the lies anymore. So, I spilled everything about Alex, the affair, the late-night messages, the hotel receipts. I laid it all bare, begging Michael to see the remorse eating me up inside. He just sat there, stone-faced, absorbing my confession without a word. It was like talking to a statue. The next day, Michael packed a bag and left. Said he needed space to think, to figure out if there was anything left of us to save. Watching him go, I felt the full weight of my choices crashing down on me. Alone, with our baby on the way, the future seemed more uncertain than ever. As if on cue, Alex turned spiteful. The man I thought I knew twisted into someone unrecognizable, spreading vicious rumors about me to anyone who'd listen. My phone, once a lifeline to friends, became eerily silent. I was isolated, cut off from the world we used to share. I tried reaching out to Michael, sending letters, texts, voicemails, anything to bridge the chasm between us. All I got back were cold, formal replies, if at all. It felt like trying to grasp smoke. The more I reached, the more he slipped away. Then, amidst the storm, a moment of peace. Our daughter was born. She had Michael's eyes, that same clear gaze that had drawn me to him all those years ago. I sent him photos, a silent plea for him to see the beauty we'd created together. But silence was all that returned, a void where his voice should have been. Alex's final blow came in the form of a lawsuit, accusing me of defamation. The irony wasn't lost on me. He was the one who'd turned my life upside down, and now he was playing the victim. The legal fees piled up, draining what little savings I had left. It was a nightmare that seemed to have no end, a battle I was fighting on too many fronts. In that darkness, the light of my daughter's smile was the only thing that kept me grounded. Her innocence, untouched by the chaos around her, was a bittersweet reminder of what could have been. And as I faced each day, the battle for my reputation, for my family, and for my own peace of mind, I clung to the hope that somehow, some way, I'd find a way back from the edge. When Michael filed for divorce, it wasn't just a piece of paper, it was the crumbling of every dream I'd ever had with him. Irreconcilable differences, the document stated coldly, as if our years together could be boiled down to such sterile terms. The moment I read those words, a tidal wave of reality crashed over me, sweeping away the last remnants of hope I'd clung to. The custody battle for our daughter was a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. Michael, with his sharp legal mind and the damning evidence of my betrayal, had the upper hand from the start. I fought tooth and nail, not just for her, but for a chance at redemption. Yet, deep down, I knew it was a losing battle. The court's decision hit me like a freight train. Full custody to Michael, supervised visits for me. It was more than losing, it was being deemed unworthy. Standing there, in that sterile courtroom, the finality of the judge's words was a weight I wasn't prepared to bear. My heart shattered, not just for me, but for the precious moments I'd miss with my daughter, the everyday miracles of her growing up that I'd be a spectator to, at best. Driven by a mix of desperation and anger, I confronted Alex. His studio, once a place of allure and excitement, now felt like the epicenter of my destruction. I demanded he drop the lawsuit, that he stopped this vendetta that was costing me everything. But Alex, ever the artist of his own narrative, merely smirked and turned me away. There was no remorse in his eyes, only the satisfaction of watching me crumble. Retreating back to my canvases, I sought solace in the swirl of paints, channeling my agony into art. Each stroke was a word unspoken, each color a fragment of my shattered life. The pieces I created were a far cry from the vibrant works I once prided myself on. They were dark, tumultuous echoes of my inner chaos. Then came the news that felt like a knife twisting in an already fatal wound. Michael had remarried. His new wife, by all accounts, was everything I wasn't: stable, nurturing, a beacon of light in the life I'd darkened. Hearing about how she doted on our daughter, the stability she provided, was a bitter pill that no amount of swallowing could ease. My mistakes had paved the way for another to build the home I'd destroyed. The dismissal of Alex's lawsuit should have been a victory, but it tasted like ash in my mouth. Yes, I was freed from one more chain, but the freedom came too late. My reputation, once the hallmark of my identity, was now marred by scandal and whispers. The art community, which had once embraced me, now regarded me with a mix of pity and disdain. This chapter of my life, marked by loss and tainted by betrayal, forced me to confront the hardest truths about myself. In the pursuit of what I thought I wanted, I'd lost everything that truly mattered. The journey back to myself, to some semblance of peace, was going to be a long one, paved not just with regret, but with a determination to rebuild, piece by broken piece. The day I spotted Michael and our daughter in the park was like a scene straight out of a movie I never wanted to watch. There they were, in a bubble of blissful normalcy, while I stood on the outside, a ghost of the family picture. Watching them, laughter floating in the air. A lump formed in my throat, heavy with the full realization of what I'd thrown away. In a moment that reeked of desperation and longing, I approached them. "Michael, please," I started, my voice barely a whisper, choked with emotions. Can I just be a part of her life? Anyway, I'll take anything." His hesitation was a glimmer of hope, but it flickered out as he turned and walked away, our daughter's hand in his, leaving me drowning in silence. Moving to a smaller apartment felt like stepping into a physical manifestation of my new reality. Gone were the spacious rooms and the laughter that filled them. In their place, a cramped space that echoed my solitary existence. My days bled into each other, a monotonous cycle of work and lonely evenings, the silence a constant reminder of the life I once had. When I heard Alex had left town, a part of me felt relieved. Yet, that relief was tinged with a profound loneliness, the finality of his departure closing a chapter one wished I'd never open. His absence left a void, not of love, but of tumult, a strange silence after a storm. The visits with my daughter became my lifeline, islands of joy in a sea of remorse. Her laughter, pure and untainted, pierced through the fog of my despair, a beacon reminding me of the love I'd compromised, the innocence I vowed to protect but ultimately endangered. Then came Michael's letter, a formal request laced with a finality that took my breath away. For her well-being, it read, an unspoken accusation that stung more than any argument we'd ever had. That letter wasn't just paper, it was a wall he'd erected, one I couldn't scale without causing more harm to the one person who mattered most. Slowly, as the seasons changed, the art community began to open its doors to me once again. My paintings, a visceral outpouring of my journey through the tempest of my own making, started to draw attention. Yet, even as accolades came, whispers of my past clung to me like a shadow, a constant reminder of the price of my choices. Finding solace in my work, I poured everything into my canvases, each stroke a step towards redemption, a plea for understanding. Art became my voice when words failed, a bridge to a world I feared I'd lost forever. In the blend of colors, the chaos of my emotions found order, and in that order, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, I could rebuild from the ruins. Kicking off my solo art exhibit felt like bearing my soul to the world. There, on those white walls, hung my journey, every brushstroke a chapter, every color a raw emotion. The crowd buzzed with a mix of admiration for the art and whispers about the artist. It was a cocktail of pride and vulnerability, a high like no other. But pride can be a precarious thing. Amidst the clinking glasses and hushed tones, I caught snippets of conversations not meant for my ears. "Can you believe she's the one who?" The words stung, slicing through the evening's charm. My public facade of strength cracked, then shattered. I left my own exhibit early, the taste of humiliation bitter in my mouth. The aftermath wasn't just emotional. My body revolted against the stress and heartache, a cruel reminder that you can't outrun your problems. Not really. Health issues cropped up, laying me low, forcing me to confront the toll my choices had taken on me, not just mentally, but physically too. Then came the conversation with my mom. She'd been a silent pillar all this while, but silence has a way of building up, doesn't it? "I'm so disappointed in you," she said, her voice a mix of sorrow and disbelief. Her words were a reflection I couldn't escape, a painful acknowledgement of the havoc I'd wreaked on my own life. Therapy was my next step, a dive into the murky waters of guilt and depression. Each session was a battle, a confrontation with the darkest parts of myself. Yet, through that pain, I started to find something resembling forgiveness, not from others, but from the person I needed it from the most, me. As my health began to rebound, so did my resolve to be there for my daughter, to salvage whatever fragments of a relationship I could during those supervised visits. It was a chance to show her the love that never wavered, even when everything else did. Unexpectedly, Michael's wife reached out, a gesture that took me by surprise. "Let's do what's best for her," she said, her voice cautious but kind. It was a small olive branch, but in the desert of our interactions, it felt like an oasis. Our daughter's birthday party became a testament to that fragile truce. Michael and I, together yet apart, surrounded by the innocent laughter of children, including our own. The air was thick with unspoken words and what-ifs, yet there we were, putting on brave faces, united by a love for our daughter that transcended the mess we'd made. That day, as I watched our daughter blow out her candles, a simple yet profound wish echoed silently in my heart. A wish for healing, for understanding, and maybe, just maybe, for a future where the scars we bore could lead us to a place of peace. Diving headfirst into writing my memoir was like ripping off a Band-Aid. Each word, a step towards confronting the mess I'd made, my journey from love to the depths of loss and back. It was raw, unfiltered, and brutally honest. Sitting at my desk, I poured everything onto those pages, the good, the bad, and the downright ugly. It was me, no holds barred, owning up to every mistake, every tear, and every moment of joy I'd experienced. When the memoir hit the shelves, I braced for impact, ready for backlash, for judgment, for pity. Instead, what I got was an outpouring of support, critical acclaim that took me by surprise. My story, it seemed, resonated with more people than I'd dared to hope. Suddenly, I was not just the woman from the scandal. I was an author, a speaker, someone with something worth saying. One of the most surreal moments came during a speaking engagement. After my talk, a young woman approached me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and determination. "Your story, it gave me the courage to leave a situation I knew was destroying me," she confessed. Her words were a balm to the guilt that still lingered, a sign that maybe, just maybe, my mess could serve as a message. But life has a way of throwing curveballs. At a parent-teacher conference, Michael and I found ourselves together, not as adversaries, but as co-parents concerned about our daughter. The conversation was awkward, tentative, but beneath the surface, there was a glimmer of something new. It was the beginning of a truce, a step toward something resembling peace. Inspired by my own journey, I set up a scholarship for single mothers pursuing the arts. It was my way of giving back, of lifting others from the pit of despair I knew all too well. The scholarship wasn't just about financial aid, it was a message of hope, a declaration that your past does not define your future. Then came the news of Michael's wife's illness. The woman who had stepped into the life I'd vacated was suddenly vulnerable, and without a second thought, I offered to help with our daughter. It was an odd, unexpected role reversal, but it brought a new level of understanding and, dare I say, respect between us. The day Michael drove away with our daughter after one of my visits marked the end of a chapter. Standing there, watching them leave, the autumn breeze stirred memories of a day long gone, a day filled with hope and promises. It was a poignant reminder of the cycle of life, of love and loss, and of the resilience of the human spirit. As I turned to walk back into my house, alone yet not defeated, I realized that this journey, with all its ups and downs, had brought me to a place of strength I never knew I had. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face it, armed with the lessons learned and the knowledge that from the ashes of my past, Sarah dabbed on a bolder shade of lipstick, a streak of defiance against the graying afternoon sky. It wasn't just the color. It was the way she applied it, slow, deliberate. Her eyes sparkled with a newfound determination. It was time. Not time for work, though that's what she'd told John. It was time for something else, something she refused to name even to herself. Be back sometime late, she told her husband. Big client meeting. Sarah smoothed down her pencil skirt, forcing a bright smile. The lie tasted bitter, but the anticipation was sweet. John barely looked up from his newspaper. Okay, don't work too hard. Never do, she mumbled. But he didn't hear. Probably didn't care, either. The thought stung, familiar and sharp, but underneath a thrill was growing. Leaving the house felt more like an escape than just going out. Sarah checked her phone, a text from him already waiting. It sent a shiver down her spine. Anticipation laced with a nervousness she hadn't felt in years. She took one last look at the house, so ordinary, so suffocating compared to the electricity coursing through her veins. The hotel was an hour's drive away. A calculated distance. Long enough to savor the rebellion. Short enough to return before John got too suspicious, as if he'd even notice. Another jolt of anger spiked her excitement. Sarah started the engine, picturing the hotel room, its anonymity. She checked into the hotel under her maiden name, heart pounding as she rode the elevator to the third floor. Every chime of the elevator felt like a countdown. As she unlocked the door to room 323, Sarah knew she had left her old life firmly behind. There was no guilt anymore, only a breathless, intoxicating rush of something new, something dangerous. The work trip was meant to be a drag. Endless PowerPoint presentations, bland hotel food, and the same tired faces from the office. Instead, it became something Sarah wouldn't have dared to dream of. Matt was the catalyst. He wasn't the suit and tie type, a refreshing break from the stuffy colleagues surrounding her. With his easy laughter and genuine interest, he cracked Sarah's carefully constructed facade open. So, Sarah. Matt leaned in, his eyes glinting with amusement at the hotel bar. Besides saving the world one spreadsheet at a time, what are you passionate about? Sarah had to think. It had been so long since anyone had asked that. I used to paint back in college, she offered, a little surprised at herself. Matt's eyebrows went up. That's cool. Why'd you stop? Life. She shrugged, but something sparked in her. Maybe it was the third glass of wine, maybe it was Matt's unwavering gaze, but Sarah found herself talking. About old dreams, about the feeling of paint under her fingers, about the way life seemed to get smaller the older she got. For the first time in years, Sarah felt truly seen. It wasn't just about flirting. It was about someone looking past the polished work exterior and glimpsing the woman she was hiding even from herself. Back home, the weight of that revelation crashed down. Each dinner with John became an exercise in enduring the mundane. His thinning hair wasn't a sign of aging. It was a symbol of the predictability that had become her life. As John droned on about the traffic or the upcoming quarterly reports, Sarah would fixate on the way his laughter lines seemed to deepen with each unremarkable day. Comfort had turned into a suffocating trap. Are you tired? John asked one evening after catching her vacant stare. A little, Sarah managed, and for the first time it wasn't even a complete lie. She was exhausted from pretending everything was fine, from ignoring the hollowness echoing inside her. Sarah found herself staring at her sleeping husband one night, the gentle rise and fall of his chest a stark contrast to the turmoil within her. That's when the question, as terrifying as it was exhilarating, whispered its way into her mind. Is this all I get? Is this what I settle for? The chime of her phone was a jolt in the silence of the night. John was already snoring lightly beside her, a muffled rhythm marking the passage of wasted hours. One glance at the screen and Sarah's pulse quickened. It was him, a name she still hadn't saved in her contacts. Can't sleep. Thinking of you. His message glowed against the darkness. A rush of giddy excitement, mixed with guilt, surged through Sarah. She knew she should turn the phone off, ignore the temptation. But the allure was too intoxicating. She bit her lip, then started typing, fingers moving with surprising boldness. Guess I'm not the only one. Her reply was sent with a mix of exhilaration and fear. Dreams were no longer innocent escapes. Now they were charged with a stolen intimacy, a faceless stranger fueling the desire her marriage had starved for so long. In the bland morning light, these dreams left her restless, the longing for more a constant ache. Work became a place of hidden exchanges between stolen glances at her phone screen. Each double entendre from him brought a rush of power and a deepening pit of guilt. The excitement fueled a carelessness Sarah hadn't felt in years. She dressed with attention she hadn't bothered with for her husband in far too long, finding a thrill in the simple act of choosing a brighter blouse, a slightly shorter skirt. Someone looking good today, a male colleague quipped as Sarah passed his desk. She felt a heat flush her cheeks, not from shame but from a flicker of satisfaction. It was a dangerous game, one she knew she shouldn't be playing, yet the thrill outweighed the worry, at least for now. Sarah had lost all sense of caution. Her once measured messages were now an uninhibited outpouring of the desires her marriage had long buried. The stranger responded in kind, fueling her recklessness. The buzz of her phone was better than any drug, an intoxicating dose of attention and lust beamed straight into her pocket. At her desk, she found herself staring at the computer screen, not at the spreadsheets it displayed, but at the imagined responses buzzing in her head. The stolen minutes at work, once filled with mindless tasks, became charged with a nervous energy Sarah hadn't felt since she was a teenager sneaking phone calls with her first crush. She couldn't wait to get her hands on her phone the second a bathroom break or a coffee run could be justified. The change in her behavior was impossible to miss. Sarah's coworkers, always a little wary of her aloofness, now openly gossiped about her newfound vibrancy. She pretended not to notice, but with each sidelong glance and whispered comment a thrill coursed through her. It was validation tinged with shame, a volatile combination that fed her desperation and her defiance, yet at home the shift in her became a silent protest. Her wardrobe changes were subtle but calculated, a bolder lipstick shade, a blouse just slightly lower cut. Sarah longed for even a hint of a reaction from John, a glimmer of interest in his eyes. Surely he must notice, must see the difference. The disappointment hit harder than outright indifference would have. You look nice, he mumbled one evening, barely glancing at her as he flipped through TV channels. It was empty praise, and it made Sarah ache not for his desire but for proof that the vibrant woman she felt inside was somehow breaking out from the shell of her numb marriage. The argument exploded out of nowhere. One minute they were debating what to order for takeout, the next John's voice was raised, his usual calm gone. I feel like I live with a stranger, Sarah, he accused. You never talk to me, never want to do anything. You barely help around the house anymore. His words cut deeper than she could admit. It wasn't the chores, it wasn't him, it was the dullness that threatened to swallow her whole. But Sarah couldn't explain any of that. Why are you making such a big deal? She snapped back. I'm a little stressed, that's all. He gave her a doubtful look but let it slide, retreating to the comfort of the TV. Sarah felt a fresh surge of frustration. It wasn't even a real fight, a release of the simmering tension that had no outlet. The moment he left the room, Sarah's hand fished for her phone. It was almost a reflex now, any spare moment, any twinge of boredom, and her fingers sought the familiar contours of the device. This time there was no thrilling message waiting. For the first time she felt a pang of disappointment. It wasn't just him anymore, it was the escape he offered, the fantasy lifeline he represented. Sarah began scrolling through their past conversations, feeding the growing obsession. She reread his words, analyzed them, imagined them meant just for her. He didn't know her real life, her baggage, her disappointments. To him, she was a blank slate, an exhilarating possibility. The phone felt suddenly heavier in her hand. Sarah knew on some level how reckless, how dangerous all of this was. But the flicker of excitement, the way it kept the dullness at bay was addictive, and for now that addiction was all that mattered. The coffee shop was generic, a bland chain outpost nestled in a strip mall, but none of that mattered. The moment Sarah spotted him waiting at a corner table, her world narrowed. He was less handsome than his messages had suggested, more ordinary, yet the air crackled with undeniable energy. Their initial conversation was stilted. Small talk felt ridiculous when there was so much unspoken between them, but his eyes, fixated on her with an intensity John never possessed, made her skin prickle. "You're even more beautiful in person," he said, a line he must have used countless times, yet it landed on Sarah like a revelation. The rest of the afternoon blurred. There were touches, a hand brushing against hers as he passed the sugar, his knee lingering against hers under the table. Nothing overt, yet each tiny contact sent a shockwave through her. That night in bed beside John, guilt washed over Sarah, potent and nauseating. She turned away from him, pretending to sleep, the feel of the stranger's brief touch burning an imprint on her skin. Sleep was a long time coming. "It's just once," she whispered into the darkness, as if trying to convince herself. "Just a little excitement, then it's done." But even as she voiced it, Sarah knew it was a lie. She was no longer looking for a fleeting experience. She craved the oblivion his attention provided, the desperate rush of feeling desired in a way she hadn't in years. Her justifications grew bolder, along with the risks she was willing to take. "My marriage is dead anyway," she'd reason. "I deserve a little happiness." It was a mantra she clung to, a desperate attempt to drown out the guilt whispering in her ear. The lies came easier now, rolling off Sarah's tongue with a practiced nonchalance that surprised even herself. "A late client dinner here, an unexpected weekend work trip there." John either didn't notice or didn't care enough to question. It was both a relief and a sharp stab of guilt. "Big presentation next week," she'd mention over dinner, offering the bare minimum to justify her increasing absences. John would just nod, absorbed in his phone or some sports recap. The disconnect between them yawned like a chasm, making the deceptions almost bearable. Booking the hotel room was different. The anonymity of searching online made it somehow less real, but the moment she hit confirm, her heart hammered a wild rhythm against her ribs. She researched the hotel meticulously, choosing one an hour's drive away, somewhere unremarkable, easily forgettable. The room was booked under Sarah's maiden name, a small act of defiance that sent a thrill of terror and anticipation through her. Sarah Mitchell, she repeated her old name out loud in the empty kitchen. It sounded foreign, but strangely empowering. It was the name of a woman who made bold, dangerous choices, not the name of a bored, neglected wife. Each day closer to the rendezvous brought a nauseating mix of dread and excitement. The lies felt heavier, the guilt a constant low-level hum beneath the surface. But then the image of him would flare in her mind, the intensity in his eyes, and the guilt would recede, replaced by a restless craving for an escape from her suffocating life. Her finger hovered over the send button. Sarah had typed and retyped the message a dozen times, the hotel name, the room number, the date, plain details that held the weight of an impossible choice. Finally, with a deep breath, she willed her trembling hand to obey. She hit the button. There was no turning back now. "See you soon" was his only response, short and almost clinical. It should have felt disappointing, but instead a jolt of adrenaline shot through Sarah, drowning out any lingering doubt. Anticipation, stark and tinged with panic, replaced the uncertainty. The night in the hotel was a blur. Desire, sharp and intoxicating, warred with a terror so deep it made her nauseous. Yet once their bodies became one, it was as though the guilt dissolved, replaced by a desperation that surprised even Sarah. He was not what she'd imagined. Not cruel, not gentle, just a man caught in the same rush of clandestine excitement. It made the experience both less romantic and somehow more potent. This wasn't about love or deep connection. It was raw, stripped bare need, a release from the stifling constraints of her life. Afterwards, lying in the stale hotel sheets, Sarah felt a different kind of hollowness. The guilt gnawed at her, persistent and heavy. Yet beneath that familiar pang there was something new, a spark of anger directed not only at herself, but at the life that had left her craving this reckless escape. The shower scorched her skin, but Sarah couldn't seem to scrub away the imprint of him. The hotel's cheap soap was no match for the lingering scent of his cologne, or the phantom feeling of his hands on her body. She stepped out, shivering, less from cold than from a bone-deep shame she couldn't wash clean. The drive home was mechanical. Each mile seemed to magnify the betrayal, turning the excitement of the previous night into a crushing weight. Looking at the familiar streets and the house that awaited her, Sarah wanted to turn the car around, to disappear anywhere but home. Yet she pulled into the driveway, plastered on a smile, and walked through the door. "Hey!" John looked up from the couch, a flicker of surprise on his face. "You're back early. Meeting got cancelled." Sarah lied, her heart stuttering a little with the ease of it. "How was your day?" The rest of the evening was an exercise in normalcy. She forced herself to ask about his work, to feign interest in a documentary he put on. It was exhausting, but the adrenaline from the deception coursed through her, replacing some of the shame. There was a new edge to her, a dangerous thrill in knowing she possessed a secret that could shatter this illusion of a life. Later, as John snored softly beside her, Sarah lay awake staring at the ceiling. The guilt sat lower now, replaced by a sense of power. It wasn't a comfortable feeling, but it was something. A sign that she wasn't entirely swallowed up by the monotony of her existence. The lies once heavy and guilt-inducing became a second skin. Meetings with non-existent clients, sudden work trips to faceless cities. The fabrications piled up. Sarah marveled at her own cunning, the ease with which the deceptions tripped off her tongue. "Such a shame you missed Sharon's birthday dinner," a coworker commented, sympathy dripping from her voice. A pang of the old guilt threatened, but Sarah ruthlessly suppressed it. A ready excuse was on the tip of her tongue, but this time something else bubbled to the surface instead, a cold, defiant satisfaction. She was playing a game, a thrilling, dangerous one, and she was winning hands down. Sarah found herself actively enjoying the deceptions, the way they carved a chasm between her and the dreary life she shared with John. With each stolen hour, each lie perfectly executed, her sense of power twisted into something new, superiority. The affair was proof that she hadn't vanished into her marriage, that she could still conjure excitement, danger even. It offered a twisted validation she craved, and she held it close. Watching John putter around, oblivious to her new game, the pity was undeniable. It was quickly swallowed by something sharper, more contemptuous than she would have thought herself capable of. He wasn't cruel, just achingly dull. His routines, his comfortable predictability, now felt like shackles. He didn't deserve her betrayal, of course, but was the betrayal really the worst part? Or was it his complete ignorance of the vibrant, desperate woman she had become right beside him? One afternoon, while John rambled about some car trouble, Sarah's mind drifted away. Back to the hotel room, the fevered touch of stolen intimacy, the thrill of being wanted with such raw desperation, it banished any remaining guilt. She belonged to this world of risk and secrecy, and even the ever-present danger of being caught fueled a defiance she never thought she possessed. The receipt lay on her pillow, an innocent scrap of paper that felt like a bomb had detonated in the room. Sarah knew instantly it was from the restaurant, the cozy Italian place with dim lighting and overly generous wine pours, the place she had been last Tuesday, the night of a supposed late-night client crisis. John's move was subtle, non-accusatory, yet more chilling than any screaming confrontation could have been. He didn't have to say a word, the message was clear. "I see you." A wave of icy panic washed over her. The thrill was gone, replaced by a terror she hadn't anticipated. Her meticulous plans, her carefully crafted deceptions, seemed to crumble in a matter of seconds. Sarah's first instinct was to reach for her phone, to contact him, not from any remaining affection, but out of desperation. They needed a plan, a way to salvage this, to control the narrative before John took charge. The buzzing of unanswered calls felt like a death knell. Text after desperate text went unsent. The silence was more agonizing than any direct rejection could have been. He was cutting her loose, leaving her alone to face the consequences. Suddenly a wave of clarity washed over Sarah, colder than any fear. The stranger was never a lifeboat, she realized. He was barely even a person. He was a symptom of her discontent, a catalyst for the reckless behavior she had cloaked in a fantasy of escape. Now that fantasy was gone, and she was left with the wreckage. When John arrived home that evening, Sarah was waiting for him. The fight she once would have desperately avoided now felt inevitable. She braced herself, but the attack never came. It was far worse. "I'm not even angry, Sarah," he said, his voice hollow. "Just so incredibly sad." His words felt more destructive than any rage-filled outburst. Sarah saw the flicker of disappointment die from his eyes, leaving an emptiness that mirrored the hollowness she'd always feared was at the marriage. It was worse than being hated. It was being dismissed. In that moment, Sarah knew she'd lost